Kevin Pace said this morning, we're trying to do things to keep people alive. And then we have to come back into the office and then switch in the hubs and go into, that continuity or behavior. And that's why it's exciting to have Sasha Lewis on today, because when you talk about management and when you talk about data, there's a huge continuity concept that you can't be freewheeling.
You cannot ignore. Absolutely. And I am excited for today, Sasha, because you are going to be sharing with us so many amazing things. Sasha Lewis, CFRE, principal at Moves Management Consulting. She's talking to us today about nonprofit summer to-do task. And already in our chitty chat and even before that, we've just had some really robust conversations about what your nonprofit summer to-do task should include, or you might want to consider including. So that's what our episode is on today. Thrilled to have you back, Sasha. Also thrilled to have you as one of our presenting sponsors. You can see her logo, Moves Management, right there on the slide deck in front of you. We are so extremely grateful to each and every one of our presenting sponsors. They continue to invest in the episodes and in the show overall, but really in each and every one of your communities. They are here, they exist. Their whole mission in their company is to help you do more good. So please do check them out. Give them a like, some love, give them some good follow energy, and check them out online, because I guarantee you they've got amazing expertise to share with you and your team. Thanks to Julia Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy, for having this wonderful idea and creating these episodes. I am so honored that I get to play alongside you every day. I'm Jarrett Ransom, also known as the Nonprofit Nerd, CEO of the Raven Group. And it's really just been a pleasure to go through these episodes. I think we're on like 313 perhaps, but we are really getting up there in age, and I've just loved every conversation. So here we are, back to you, Sasha. Welcome back, and thank you for spending your time and your talents with us this morning.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here and really appreciate the opportunity to have the discussion today on some things that we can do over the summer to really help our organization, stay fresh, stay on the cutting edge, or at least start to get to the cutting edge of things that we need to be thinking about when it comes to data. And I do tend to focus in on the database, but the things that I'm talking about today do connect with the database, but are definitely things that come in a collaboration with our marketing departments, our development teams, and everybody together to really make sure that we are using these few moments we do get in the summer when people are on vacation or out of the office, where we could take a few more minutes to take care of some things that often get put on the back burner. So again, looking forward to having that discussion today.
I appreciate this because I think I fall into the trap that, okay, summer's here. I can relax. And I think it's really detrimental, because then I overcommit mentally sometimes. And then I'm like, okay, we're going to get this organized and we're going to get this straightened out. We're going to get this all ready to go. Because I know when the fall comes, that's not the time we can make change. We got to just like work the plan. And so I appreciate you kind of reframing us. And I love that you are a CFRE, so that you're not just looking at that data piece, although that's the overall call, I guess, clarion call. But I've got to ask you, we've got several to go through. Standard communications checkup. Wow.
This is the one that I started with, that maybe, I don't know if these were in order, but this was the one that to me is one of the most important things that gets overlooked in our organizations. And these are our thank you letters, our reoccurring monthly gift output, the emails that are associated with our online receipts. It's the things that tend to burn and churn transactionally with our organization. And we send these out, but we stop, in my opinion, thinking and realizing how many mission moments we have. And so take our donor thank you letters. If you have only updated your thank you letter one time a year, usually it's kind of in the fall, maybe, and maybe not even every year, every 2 or 3 years, that means your donors have received the exact same message from you over and over again. I actually encountered an organization that had not changed that letter for 14 years. And so when first thing we did was write a new letter. But it's those reminders that this is an opportunity to talk with your donors, to tell them the amazing things that they're helping accomplish. And your thank you letters, whether it's the printed ones or your e-receipts or whatever those communication points are, that is a missed opportunity to share a current mission moment, to share a testimonial. And I would also encourage in a lengthy way to say, don't make them so long. Start shortening them a little bit. The essay long thank you letters I see regularly are more than a donor is ever going to read. They don't need to, and frankly, I don't think want to hear about every little thing you did. They want to know the big things. They want to know the stories. So take a look at them. I encourage you to slim them down if you've got a 1 or 2 page letter. Get to the, a focused point, put the letter, text stuff that you have to, but take a moment to audit whatever pieces of communication you are sending out on a regular basis. Make it fresh, make it vibrant, and use this time to really tell them the exciting things you accomplished this last year, because I can guarantee that if your organization is still functioning, you accomplished some amazing things over this last year.
I love that comment. Jarrett, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was. I love this conversation. And ironically, I just had an executive coaching session this morning before I got on live here for the show. And
Wow.
the individual I was coaching literally said, well, it's summer, the board's gone. There's a lot of travel. Everything kind of stands still in that arena. And I said, no, it actually doesn't. Here's what I'd like for you to consider. And one of the things, honestly, Sasha, I had no idea this was a topic. This key point really was going back to audit some of these elements of what's being sent. How are you engaging with your board members? How are you telling the mission moment stories? So this is perfect. And, one of the things I do when I work with my clients is I do audit their thank you letters and their donor receipts. But I love that you said the e-receipts, because I am guilty. Sometimes those get forgotten.
Yeah.
Well, I must say, and I'll give a little shout out if you're on Twitter, and the only thing that I really follow on Twitter is the whiny donor. And the whiny donor, if you're not familiar, is this donor that truly will kind of blast nonprofits for the stuff that they send. And recently, the whiny donor had talked about receiving like a thank you letter or something, and it was dear friend, and it was not even formatted, and it was basically a shell of a template. And what I realized when I saw that was, that means they had just implemented a new CRM system. Nobody understood how to go in and configure the e-receipts, yes. And they probably don't have the staff to do so. So yes. I've started to follow what they're saying and going, I wonder what's happening on the operational side of things. And if you're not watching that Twitter feed, I encourage you to do so as a nonprofit professional, because it really makes you pause and think, well, what am I skipping? And that's also why I wanted to bring this up is, we need to do better, because we don't know who's blasting us, out in the Twitter sphere. And, we need to be elevating our quality, because our donors deserve better. And our basic standard communication is one of the main ways we can show our donors we care enough about them to make sure that we're updating our thank you letters and our regular communications.
I love that.
I know. We're going to have to get our executive producer who handles the Twitter feed for us to check out the whiny donor. This makes me think, as you say, Sasha, we don't want to be blasted on the Twitter sphere. And here I was thinking like the Walmart Hall of Shame was the worst thing that could happen. But there's so much more out there with, what not to do. And we've had Stephen Shattuck, right, with Bloomerang talk about
that.
His test gifts and what he's done to really audit the sector across the nation, across the sectors, to see exactly how they recognize a gift from a first-time donor.
Yeah, it's riveting. Okay,
I will say, if I may, it's individuals like Steve Bloomerang and some of these other software providers that are making this even more important, because of the fact that there is more we can do now with engagement, analytics, and things like that. So it really is adding to the tools that you've invested in for your organization and helping to make them better with even some of these fundamental things. Thank you, Jarrett.
Yes, absolutely.
I think that's super cool. Okay, now you have another summer vacation to do point, and this is biographical health check. I don't even know what that is.
So this was really taking a moment to do a look at your donor records. So if you're
Okay.
an organization that is sending out direct mails and you're pulling mailing lists, and you have to spend an exorbitant amount of time deduping or filling in, fixing the name because it's not printing the title and it looks really weird. That's what I'm talking about. It's those things that you are wasting your time over and over again by manually fixing them in the Excel file versus pausing and actually taking the time to go fix them in the donor database. So do a query. And if you're an organization that still heavily uses Mr. and Mrs. as a part of your addressee salutation format and you're missing titles, go in and fill them in. Work together as a team to accomplish a cohort of them, or small section of them, a day. If your organization deals a lot with online giving, there's some really great new platforms like Classy that create integration opportunities and duplicate records. If you don't get ahead of those duplicate records, you're eventually going to have a database that is so clunky and dirty, everybody's going to be frustrated. So pause and take a moment to empower team members to help facilitate this biographical wellness check of your database. If your donor records aren't healthy and you don't have the proper solicit codes, which translates to how do they want to be communicated with us, and you're not building those into the mailing list that you're then extracting and pulling out, we're continuing to reinforce that mindset to the donor that they are not important, that we can't communicate with them. For those that know me, you hear me talk about the Amazon experience. Our donors deserve that. They need to know that if they like a green shirt, we're going to inundate them with every green shirt they could possibly ever see again. And our donors deserve that kind of care from us as organizations. And it's this health check and making sure that their records are clean and accurate, so that when we are communicating with them, we're showing them that we care enough about them to make sure that how we see them is correct. And it does take time, but it's just an intention of time. 20-30 minutes a day can make an incredible impact on the data health of your biographical records for your donor database.
I appreciate you saying this because I'm on a lot of lists, right? And one of the things that when things happen that are incorrect, or like I get 3 annual reports mailed to me, things of that nature, I'm never worried about myself that they don't feel that I'm worthy, but I think that the organization's not well run. I put a whole lot of baggage onto the backs of an organization when they don't do things right, because then I think it's filtering down and they're not serving the community well, or their constituency, their clients, And so it's such an important piece of the donor experience. And I just feel, Sasha, until we met you, we weren't really talking about it. We were.
I'm sorry. It's such an important piece. It's the part that's driving the conversations. When we talk about what's changing things, it's donor engagement. And donor engagement is absolutely built on your foundation of your CRM system, your donor database. And if that is not correct, you're not going to engage your donors. You're going to have missed messages. Things aren't going to go to the right areas. You're not going to, in the biographical health check your emails. If your donor has multiple emails on their record and one's for their spouse, get that over on their spouse's record so you actually can start engaging them as individuals instead of assuming that they have the same interests. You're really expanding your opportunity to understand your donors by taking the time to make sure your system is set up correctly. It's the most important thing you could do right now, moving forward, to prepare your organization to be ready for the truly digital engagement world.
And I cannot tell you, with a name like Jarrett, even after I have talked to someone on the phone, right? Even I have Zoomed with someone through the virtual space and I still receive a Mr. Mm-hmm. That really does not sit well with me.
Well, and you bring up a point that I've shared before and I will share again, and it's still somewhat controversial, but I do consider it no longer appropriate to title or gender your records in your database. If you're not asking for that information, right, I don't consider it to be correct anymore. Now, there are organizations where the donor bases tend to be a little bit more older and more mature, and so they do still appreciate that structure. But for that exact reason, Jarrett, I have a friend, they named their daughter James. Never would have assumed that, but what right do we have to assume any of those things? And we frankly don't have a title that represents they, them, and individuals that identify
Right.
as non-binary. So how do we honor their identity when we don't have one in our formal system anyway? So I
Right.
encourage you to be mindful of that. And if you are an organization that it would make sense to convert away from the Mr. and Mrs. structure, do that this summer. It takes time to make sure they're correct. You don't want to make mistakes, but do that. Because Jared, I would assume you'd much rather be Dear Jarrett than Dear Mr. Jarrett, you know, kind of thing.
And I'm so glad that you mentioned the non-binary, because when we talk so much about Mr. and Mrs. or Miss, and we're correcting that in the system, I was curious how we do identify, with the gender or the non-gender of they. So for you to mention that and to say, this is a great summer checkup. Maybe
I like
we
that.
make the decision moving forward, as we really look into our Jedi space, and look to see, like, is this still necessary that we include that formal salutation? We might want to scrap it all together. And I would much rather, and in fact, I tell my son's school this when I receive, all the letters, please refer to me as Jarrett. That's what I want.
Absolutely. And I think it reflects, as an organization, being aware of the modern times and the way that we're transitioning and the world's shifting. We don't necessarily have this formal structure where we're all Mr. and Mrs. And so it has changed. And so be adaptable to that. I would encourage you, as again, you're looking at your summer projects, things to work on.
It's important. For years, I never changed my name when I got married. So for 30 years plus 40 years of the life together, I've had a different last name than my husband and my child. And our child. And so there's nothing that torques him out more than getting addressed as Mr. Patrick.
Well, one thing that I would love to throw into the online gift form that I don't know if has come up is start asking individuals their pronouns, like preferred pronouns, and then build those into their thank you letters, into their acknowledgments as merged fields. Again, it's a simple thing to do. It's a merge field. And then this takes time. So this is why it's a great summer project, and you have your team working on it. And you start to, again, identify and work with individuals and communicate with them however they want to, and recognize something, very basic, was just how, they prefer their pronouns to be across the board. So rather than, gender, maybe what our new question is what's your preferred pronoun?
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Now, this kind of dovetails into the next summer vacation task: reports, queries, and those templates. I mean, we've been talking a lot about that, but I would imagine that because of the pandemic, so many of our templates need to be changed. I mean, we're doing things differently. What are your thoughts on this?
That's exactly part of it. Is we have all of these that happen year over year. The templates of reports, and some systems are great about archiving them. Some of them, it creates this very lengthy, long list that gets really hard to filter through. And to be frank, for a long time, I personally never valued the time to go back and kind of look at these and say, are the ones that we're not using, do we just need to clean them out? I've always kind of been like, leave them, because you never know who's going to get them. Well, now when I see reports that are 20 to 30 years old and nobody's executed them in that long, I feel much better about saying we can let those go and we can clean them up so that we make it easier for our teammates to understand what are the current reports, what are the current templates, how are we currently pulling data, so that I can be consistent in the way that I am generating my output. Because more often than not, when we're starting to generate reports in these templates, we shift them when a new team member comes in because they didn't understand how the last team member pulled them. And when that happens, we actually have the potential of changing the metrics in a sense. And so this is an opportunity to get rid of that potential confusion, those old data points, those old reports, those things, from staff members that are decades long gone. If they don't have current value add and you have some downtime, I finally have embraced the notion that it is worth the time to go in and clean up, because 20 years later, nobody knows what that means anyway.
If they no longer spark joy, it's time to release them.
It's time to let it go.
What I do, and I wonder if you would like give me the blessing of this, or say, well, it's not really necessary. When I do create a report, query, a template, I put the year in which I created it, so that if it's, let's say, I don't know, 2021 donor thank you, then I know that that's this year, that's the current one. But then I also have it, that template then for the next person to make a 2022. But hopefully then that also ignites back to your first topic point is change your letters, change the language, update it. So what would you say? Should I keep the year in these titles or should I not?
So I think it's a good output depending on how you structure your reports. So one of the things that I see often is people creating the same, what we call a query in Razor's Edge, for example, where it is, fiscal year 21 donor report. And the structure is exactly the same. And what I remind people is all too often these queries are intended to group people. So I will say, yes, you can keep doing that because it absolutely helps with organization, be consistent in your structure. But I encourage you to, can you craft that query or report in such a way that it is template? The year is irrelevant because it's merely updated.
Yes.
And we're using the same functionality year over year. So there's no risk of the parameters changing. That to me is the ultimate output structure we want, because we never have to question or recreate. We merely go in and update the date parameters.
Perfect.
Wow, interesting. I love that. And I think that kind of dovetails into when we first met you more than a year ago. You said we need to make data sexy again. And the concept of really understanding what it is we should be looking at is the starting point. And you said something else that makes me think of this, is that you made this comment again, right when we first met you, that you see too many people throwing out their systems because they're like, it just doesn't work. It just is garbage. It's ridiculous. But the reality is maybe they haven't set it up correctly. And I'm assuming this is what you're talking about, is you need to understand what is going to be of value so that you can focus on those pieces, right?
Absolutely. I do see that a lot, this desire to shift and jump to the next thing or the next system that's, promising bells and whistles, but it still goes down to what's your foundation. If your foundation of your system is not solid, you're just going to put bad data into the new process and most likely make it worse, because the inherited problems that you already had, if you don't have someone knowledgeable in that position assisting with that, conversion, for example, you wind up with data that belongs in such weird places because we are just trying to map it versus understand how did the organization use it. And let's make sure we map its usability, not just where we think it makes sense. And so that also leads into this conversation about security checks. One of the things that I am becoming even more concerned about and more, let's just say it's stressed out about, is the overwhelming amount of organizations that have volunteers with complete absolute supervisor rights to their database. I know that we want to trust, and you may have one or two volunteers that makes sense, but your database has a lot of private donor data. Yes, some of it is public records in our annual reports and 990s depending, but we have credit card information stored. We have, in some organizations, health information about family members, and data security is important. I'm not a cybersecurity specialist. I understand its value, but I'm not in that area. But I know enough to know that we are not protecting this as an organization, that we are so free willy-nilly about it. It's stressful when I look at organizations and when I think through even just our gift processing. We have these accesses to PayPal and all of these things that we just give to any staff member. And I'm sitting there pausing and going, and if you're not familiar, if you have access to your organization's PayPal, you have access to their bank account. And, we're just giving that away. And so I encourage you as an organization to really do an assessment of where are our logins, what things are being used. Can we create a evergreen user email that goes for all of these logins so that we stop changing it every time a staff member turns over? Let's be honest, turnover is 12 months now, 18 months at this point in most cases. I mean, it's fast. And so if we have to spend months trying to get back to the same logins because we don't have consistency, it just costs these organizations. And so I encourage you as an organization to evaluate what logins are going out, who has access to what, and these are the Nevity accounts, your donor transactions, wherever you go to get that information, however your merchant service accounts work, your donor database. These are not things to just think that they're going to be okay. You need to put data security practices around them, create security groups, if that makes sense in that system or that program, and make sure your donor data is protected. Credit card information, I don't fully understand how they steal it, but it is stealable. You can steal that pretty easy. And when anybody can log in and just start running your donors' credit cards because you really don't have good security, structures around it. Not that too many people are malice, but it could happen, and it's not worth the risk, in my opinion.
Well, and I'm thinking the whole concept of what we're talking about is doing some things during vacation time, because let's face it, our coffers are generally a little low right now, but in 60 days, 90 days, that's the pinnacle of our cash flow. And that's when we are more vulnerable, so get it done now. Jared, did we have a question that came in?
Yes, it's a comment. Great insights. Time to get to work this summer. Sasha rocks. She totally rocks, and love to know that she's staying on with us as a presenting sponsor. So these are the kind of conversations that I think are so important, and hopefully will keep us from being blasted on the Twitter sphere, as you call them. And so really looking at what that looks like with you has really been a true joy. I was taking some notes of some of these things. As you know, I do all the time, Julia. It's like I have a 3-ring binder just filled with notes here. So I've got my pen in hand taking some notes, because every time Sasha comes on, she totally rocks, and it ignites something in my brain of like, oh yeah, I need to do that.
I love it. I love it. Well, here's Sasha's information. One of the cool things about Sasha is that she is also a CFRE. So she can understand the components of data movement and all this, but yet she's tagged in and educated in the worldly ways of the nonprofit sector. And so this is why I think it's a valuable thing, especially for us, for Jarrett and I, Sasha, because we do talk about this. In fact, in a pre-meeting I had with our executive producer, he actually even brought up your name this morning and said, well, like Sasha says, because we were talking about our own internal database stuff. So this is the magic discussion that we should be having now. This is a summer issue. And so we're delighted. Again, here's Sasha's information. Go ahead and reach out to her and see how maybe she can give you some clarity in what you're doing. I'm Julia Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. I've been joined by the nonprofit nerd herself, Jarrett Ransom, CEO of the Raven Group. Again, we want to thank all of our presenting sponsors. Without you, we would not be here. I say that every day, but it really is
so true. Yes,
it really is true. And we are really excited about what things are coming forward with us. Jarrett, I think you have booked out the rest of the month, and
we're into August.
Okay. Well, there went my summer.
That's right. There went your summer. Yes, it's we're just so appreciative. Everyone's brought such great voices and views to the episodes. I love to share, Julia, that you're like, at some point we'll run out of content, but really as the sector continues to evolve, we're in COVID rebound. One of the first things, Sasha, you shared with us was, that time that you would use when you would commute? Now I want you to focus that time really on your database. Yeah. And that's changing, right? This COVID rebound timeframe is changing. So the content is ever evolving, just like our sector.
It's true. It's true. Hey, we want to remind everybody that we've launched a new program called Fundraising Events TV. It's just about the fundraising event side of our sector. So we like to say, from ballrooms to barns, from golf to galas, we got you covered. My co-host on that is Jason Champion, who we've had on before. He's just a fabulous talent. And on the nonprofit show, I have been known to call him Jason Ransom, but I want to report back to you, I haven't made that mistake yet.
Now you will, because you just said it.
Oh God, really, it's true. Oy, oy, oy. But anyway, so please join us for that. Another great episode. Thank you, Sasha Lewis. You've given me some tasks to do in my own business.
Summer vacation.
Not going anywhere except to my computer. I'm thinking.
Thank you, Sasha. It's been phenomenal.
It's really a pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
It's been great. Hey, everybody, as we end today's episode, we want to remind you to stay well so you can do well. We'll see you back here tomorrow.